Welcome to Major Intonio's presentation of My Autobiography by Benito Mussolini, published in 1928. Foreword by Richard Washburn Child, former U.S. Ambassador to Italy.
It is far from my purpose to elaborate the material in this book, to interpret it, or to add to it. With much of the drama it contains, I, being Ambassador of the United States at the time, was intimately familiar. Much of the extraordinary personality disclosed here was an open book to me long ago, because I knew well the man who now at last has written characteristically, directly, and simply of that self for which I have a deep affection. For his autobiography I am responsible. Lives of Mussolini written by others have interests of sorts. But nothing can take the place of a book which you will write yourself, I said to him. Write myself? He leaned across his desk and repeated my phrase in amazement. He is the busiest single individual in the world. He appeared hurt as if a friend had failed to understand. Yes, I said, and showed him a series of headings I had written on a few sheets of paper. All right, he said in English. I will. It was quite like him. He decides quickly and completely. So he began. He dictated. I advise that method because when he attempts to write in longhand, he corrects and corrects and corrects. It would have been too much for him, so he dictated. The copy came back and he interlined the manuscript in his own hand, a dash of red pencil and a flowing rivulet of ink, here and there. When the manuscripts began to come to me, I was troubled because mere literal translators lose the vigor of the man himself. What editing may I do? I asked him. Any that you like, he said. You know Italy. You understand fascism, you see me as clearly as any one. But there was nothing much to do. The story came through as it appears here. It is all his, and what luck for all of us, so like him. Approve of him or not, when one reads this book one may know Mussolini, or at least, if one's vision is clouded, know him better. Like the book or not, there is not an insincere line in it. I find none. Of course, there are many things which a man writing an autobiography cannot see about himself or will not say about himself. He is unlikely to speak of his own size on the screen of history. Perhaps when approval or disapproval, theories and isms, pros and cons, are all put aside, the only true measure of a man's greatness from a wholly unpartisan viewpoint may be found in the answer to this question. How deep and lasting has been the effect of a man upon the largest number of human beings? Their hearts, their thoughts, their material welfare, their relation to the universe. In our time it may be shrewdly forecast that no man will exhibit dimensions of permanent greatness equal to those of Mussolini. Admire him or not, approve his philosophies or not, concede the permanence of his success or not, consider him Superman or not, as you may, he has put to a working test on great and growing numbers of mankind. Programs unknown before, in applied spirituality, in applied plans, in applied leadership, in applied doctrines, in the applied principle that contents are more important than labels on bottles. He has not only been able to secure and hold an almost universal following, he has built a new state upon a new concept of a state. He has not only been able to change the lives of human beings, but he has changed their minds, their hearts, their spirits. He has not merely ruled a house, he has built a new house. He has not merely put it on paper or into orations, he has laid the bricks. It is one thing to administer a state. The one who does this well is called statesman. It is quite another thing to make a state. Mussolini has made a state. That is super-statesmanship. I knew him before the world at large, outside of Italy, had ever heard of him. I knew him before and after the moment he leaped into the saddle and in the days when he, almost single-handed, was clearing away chaos' own junk pile from Italy. But no man knows Mussolini. An Italian newspaper offered a prize for the best essay, showing insight into the mystery of the man. Mussolini, so the story goes, stopped the contest by writing to the paper that such a competition was absurd, because he himself could not enter an opinion. In spite of quick, firm decisions, in spite of grim determination, in spite of a well-ordered diagrammed pattern and plan of action fitted to any moment of time, Mussolini, first of all, above all, and after all, is a personality always in a state of flux, adjusting its leadership to a world eternally in a state of flux. Change the facts upon which Mussolini has acted, and he will change his action. Change the hypotheses, and he will change his conclusion. And this perhaps is an attribute of greatness seldom recognized. Most of us are forever hoping to put our world in order and finish the job. Statesmen with some idea to make over into reality hope for a day when they can say, "Well, that's done." And when it is done, often enough it is nothing. The bridges they have built are now useless, because the rivers have all changed their courses and humanity is already shrieking for new bridges. This is not an unhappy thought, says Mussolini. A finished world would be a stupid place, intolerably stupid. The imagination of mere statesmen covers a static world. The imagination of true greatness covers a dynamic world. Mussolini conceives a dynamic world. He is ready to go on the march with it, though it overturns all his structures, upsets all his theories, destroys all of yesterday, and creates a screaming dawn of a tomorrow. Opportunist is a term of reproach used to brand men who fit themselves to conditions for reasons of self-interest. Mussolini, as I have learned to know him, is an opportunist in the sense that he believes that mankind itself must be fitted to changing conditions rather than to fixed theories, no matter how many hopes and prayers have been expended on theories and programs. He has marched up several hills with the thousands and then marched down again. This strange creature of strange life and strange thoughts, with that almost psychopathic fire which was in saints and villains, in Napoleons, in Jeanne d'Arcs and in Tolstoys, in religious prophets and in Ingersolls, has been up the Socialist, the International, the Liberal, and the Conservative hills and down again. He says, "The sanctity of an ism is not in the ism. It has no sanctity beyond its power to do, to work, to succeed in practice. It may have succeeded yesterday and fail tomorrow. Failed yesterday and succeed tomorrow. The machine, first of all, must run." I have watched, with a curiosity that has never failed to creep in on me, the marked peculiarities, physical and mental, of this man. At moments he is quite relaxed, at ease, and yet the unknown gusts of his own personality play on him eternally. One sees in his eyes, or in a quick movement of his body, or in a sentence suddenly ejaculated, the effect of these gusts, just as one sees wind on the surface of the water. There is in his walk something of a prowl, a faint suggestion of the tread of the cat. He likes cats, their independence, their decision, their sense of justice, and their appreciation of the sanctity of the individual. He even likes lions and lionesses, and plays with them until those who guard his life protest against their social set. His principal pet is a Persian feline, which, being of aristocratic lineage, nevertheless exhibits a pride not only of ancestry, but condescendingly of belonging to Mussolini. And yet, in spite of his own prowl, as he walks along in his riding boots, springy, active, ready to leap, it seems, there is little else feline about him. One quality is feline, however. It is the sense of his complete isolation. One feels that he must always have had this isolation. Isolation as a boy, isolation as a young radical, adventurer, lover, worker, thinker. There is no understudy of Mussolini. There is no man, woman, or child who stands anywhere in the inner orbit of his personality. No one. The only possible exception is his daughter Edda. All the tales of his alliances, his obligations, his ties, his predilections are arrant nonsense. There are none. No ties, no predilections, no alliances, no obligations unpaid. Financially, lying voices said that he had been personally financed and backed by the industrialists of Italy. This is ridiculous to those who know. His salary is almost nothing. His own family, wife, children are poor. Politically, whom could he owe? He has made and can unmake them all. He is free to test every office holder in the whole of Italy by the yardstick of service and fitness. Beyond that, I know not one political debt that he owes. He has tried to pay those of the past. I believe that the cynicism in him is based upon the failure of some who have been rewarded to live up to the trust put in them. "But I take the responsibility for all," says he. He says it publicly with jaws firm. He says it privately with eyes somewhat saddened. He takes responsibility for everything, for discipline, for censorship, for measures which, were less rigor required, would appear repressive and cruel. "Mine," says he, and stands or falls on that. It is an admirable courage. I could, if I wished, quote instance after instance of this acceptance, sometimes when he is not to blame, of the whole responsibility of the machine. "Mine," says he, and in spite of any disillusionment he has suffered since I knew him first, He has retained his laugh, often, one is bound to say, a scornful laugh, and he has kept his faith in an ability to build up a machine, the machine of fascism, the machine built not on any fixed theory but one intended by Mussolini to run. Above all, to run, to function, to do, to accomplish, to fill the bottles with wine first, unlike the other isms, and put the labels on after. Mussolini has superstitious faith in himself. He has said it, not a faith in himself to make a personal gain. An assassin's bullet might wipe him out and leave his family in poverty. That would be that. His faith is in a kind of destiny which will allow him, before the last chapter, to finish the building of this new state, this new machine, the machine which will run and has a soul. The first time I ever saw him, he came to my residence sometime before the March on Rome, and I asked him what would be his program for Italy. His answer was immediate: work and discipline. I remember I thought at that time that the phrase sounded a little evangelical, a phrase of exhortation, but a mere demagogue would never choose it. Wilson's slogans of rights and peace and freedom are much more popular and gain easier currency than sterner phrases. It is easier even for a sincere preacher to offer soft nests to one's followers. It is more difficult to excite enthusiasm for stand-up doctrines. Any analysis and weighing of Mussolini's greatness must include recognition that he has made popular throughout a race of people, and perhaps for others, a standard of obligation of the individual, not only exacting, but one which in the end will be accepted voluntarily. Not only is it accepted voluntarily, but with an almost spiritual ecstasy, which has held up miraculously in Italy during years. When all the so-called liberals in the world were hovering over it like vultures, croaking that if it were not dead, it was about to die. It is difficult to lead men at all. It is still more difficult to lead them away from self-indulgence. It is still more difficult to lead them so that a new generation, so that youth itself, appears as if born with a new spirit, a new virility bred in the bones. It is difficult to govern a state and difficult to deal cleanly and strongly with a static program applied to a static world. But it is more difficult to build a new state and deal cleanly and strongly with a dynamic program applied to a dynamic world. This man, who looks up at me with that peculiar nodding of his head and raising of the eyebrows, has done it. There are few in the world's history who have. I had considered the phrase work and discipline as a worthy slogan, as a good label for an empty bottle. Within 6 years, this man, with a professional opposition which first barked like Pomeranians at his heels and then ran away to bark abroad, has made the label good, has filled the bottle, has turned concept into reality. It is quite possible for those who oppose the concept to say that the reality of the new spirit of Italy and its extent of full acceptance by the people may exist in the mind of Mussolini, but does not spring out of the people themselves, but it is quite untrue, as all know who really know. He throws up his somewhat stubby, meaty, short-fingered hands, strong and yet rather ghost-like when one touches them, and laughs, like Roosevelt. No one can spend much time with him without thinking that after all there are two kinds of leaders, outdoor and indoor leaders, and that the first are somewhat more magnetic, more lasting and more boyish and likable for their power than the indoor kind. Mussolini, like Roosevelt, gives the impression of an energy which cannot be bottled, which bubbles up and over like an eternally effervescent, irrepressible fluid. At these moments one remembers his playing of the violin, his fencing, his playful, mischievous humor, the dash of his courage, his contact with animals, his success in making gay marching songs for the old drab struggles of mankind with the soil, with the elements, with oars in the earth and the pathways of the seas. In the somber conclusions of the student statesman and in the sweetness of the sentimentalist statesman there is little joy. Unexpected joy is found in the leadership of a Mussolini. Battle becomes a game. The game becomes a romp. It is absurd to say that Italy groans under discipline. Italy chortles with it. It is victory. He is a Spartan too. Perhaps we need them in the world today, especially that type whose first interest is the development of the power and the happiness of a race. The last time I took leave of Mussolini, he came prowling across the room as I went toward the door. His scowl had gone. The evening had come. There had been a half-hour of quiet conversation. The strained expression had fallen from his face. He came toward me and rubbed his shoulder against the wall. He was relaxed and quiet. I remembered Lord Curzon's impatience with him long ago, when Mussolini had first come into power, and Curzon used to refer to him as that absurd man. Time has shown that he was neither violent nor absurd. Time has shown that he is both wise and humane. It takes the world a long time to see what has been dropped into the pan of its old scales. In terms of fundamental and permanent effect upon the largest number of human beings, whether one approves or detests him, the deuce is now the greatest figure of this sphere and time. One closes the door when one leaves him, feeling, as when Roosevelt was left, that one could squeeze something of him out of one's clothes. He is a mystic to himself. I imagine, as he reaches forth to touch reality in himself, he finds that he himself has gone a little forward, isolated, determined, elusive, untouchable, just out of reach, onward.
Chapter 1: A Sulphurous Land.
Almost all the books published about me put squarely and logically on the first page that which may be called my birth certificate. It is usually taken from my own notes. Well, then, here it is again. I was born on July 29, 1883, at Varano di Costa. This is an old hamlet. It is on a hill. The houses are of stone, and sunlight and shade give these walls and roofs a variegated color, which I well remember. The hamlet, where the air is pure and the view agreeable, overlooks the village of Dovia, and Dovia is in the commune or county of Predoppio in the northeast of Italy. It was at 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon when I came into the world. It was by chance the festival day of the patron saint of the old church and parish of Caminate. On the structure, a ruined tower overlooks proudly and solemnly the whole plain of Forli, a plain which slopes gently down from the Apennines, with their snow-clad tops in winter, to the undulating bottoms of Ravaldino, where the mists gather in summer nights. Let me add to the atmosphere of a country dear to me by bringing again to my memory the old district of Predoppio. It was a country well known in the 13th century, giving birth to illustrious families during the Renaissance. It is a sulphurous land. From it the ripening grapes make a strong wine of fine perfume. There are many springs of iodine waters, and on that plain and those undulating foothills and mountain spurs, the ruins of medieval castles and towers thrust up their gray-yellow walls toward the pale blue sky in testimony of the virility of centuries now gone. Such was the land, dear to me because it was my soil. Race and soil are strong influences upon us all. As for my race, my origin, many persons have studied and analyzed its hereditary aspects. There is nothing very difficult in tracing my genealogy, because from parish records, it is very easy for friendly research to discover that I came from a lineage of honest people. They tilled the soil, and because of its fertility, they earned the right to their share of comfort and ease. Going further back, one finds that the Mussolini family was prominent in the city of Bologna in the 13th century. In 1270, Giovanni Mussolini was the leader of this warlike, aggressive commune. His partner in the rule of Bologna in the days of armored knights was Fulceri Paolucci de Calboli, who belonged to a family from Predoppio also, and even today, that is one of the distinguished families. The destinies of Bologna and the internal struggles of its parties and factions, following the eternal conflicts and changes in all struggles for power, caused, at last, the exile of the Mussolinis to Argelato. From there, they scattered into neighboring provinces. One may be sure that in that era, their adventures were varied and sometimes in the flux of fortune brought them to hard times. I have never discovered news of my forebears in the 17th century. In the 18th century, there was a Mussolini in London. Italians never hesitate to venture abroad with their genius or their labors. The London Mussolini was a composer of music of some note, and perhaps it is from him that I inherit the love of the violin, which even today in my hands gives comfort to moments of relaxation and creates for me moments of release from the realities of my days. Later, in the 19th century, the family tie became more clearly defined. My own grandfather was a lieutenant of the National Guard. My father was a blacksmith, a heavy man with strong, large, fleshy hands. Alessandro, the neighbors called him. Heart and mind were always filled and pulsing with socialistic theories. His intense sympathies mingled with doctrines and causes. He discussed them in the evening with his friends, and his eyes filled with light. The international movement attracted him, and he was closely associated with names known among the followers of social causes in Italy: Andrea Costa, Balducci, Amilcar, Cipriani, and even the more tender and pastoral spirit of Giovanni Pascoli. So come and go men whose minds and souls are striving for good ends. Each conference seems to them to touch the fate of the world. Each talisman seems to promise salvation. Each theory pretends to immortality. The Mussolinis had left some permanent marks. In Bologna, there is still a street named for that family, and not long ago a tower and a square bore the name. Somewhere in the heraldic records, there is the Mussolini coat of arms. It has a rather pleasing and perhaps magnificent design. There are 6 black figures in a yellow field, symbols of valor, courage, force. My childhood, now in the mists of distance, still yields those flashes of memory that come back with a familiar scene, an aroma which the nose associates with damp earth after a rain in the springtime, or the sound of footsteps in the corridor. A roll of thunder may bring back the recollection of the stone steps where a little child who seems no longer any part of oneself used to play in the afternoon. Out of those distant memories, I receive no assurance that I had the characteristics which are supposed traditionally to make parents overjoyed at the perfection of their offspring. I was not a good boy, nor did I stir the family pride or the dislike of my own young associates in school by standing at the head of my class. I was then a restless being. I am still. Then I could not understand why it is necessary to take time in order to act. Rest for restfulness meant nothing to me then, any more than now. I believe that in those youthful years, just as now, my day began and ended with an act of will, by will put into action. Looking back, I cannot see my early childhood as being either praiseworthy or as being more than normal in every direction. I remember my father as a dark-haired, good-natured man, not slow to laugh, with strong features and steady eyes. I remember that near the house where I was born, with its stone wall with moss green in the crevices, there was a small brook and farther on a little river. Neither had much water in it, but in autumn and other seasons, when there were unexpected heavy rains, they swelled in fury, and their torrents were joyous challenges to me. I remember them as my first play spots. With my brother, Arnaldo, who is now the publisher of the daily Popolo d'Italia, I used to try my skill as a builder of dams to regulate the current. When birds were in their nesting season, I was a frantic hunter for their concealed and varied homes with their eggs or young birds. Vaguely, I sensed in all this the rhythm of natural progress, a peep into a world of eternal wonder, of flux and change. I was passionately fond of young life. I wished to protect it then as I do now. My greatest love was for my mother. She was so quiet, so tender, and yet so strong. Her name was Rosa. My mother not only reared us, but she taught primary school. I often thought, even in my earliest appreciation of human beings, of how faithful and patient her work was. To displease her was my one fear. So, to hide from her my pranks, my naughtiness, or some result of mischievous frolic, I used to enlist my grandmother and even the neighbors, for they understood my panic lest my mother should be disturbed. The alphabet was my first practice in worldly affairs, and I learned it in a rush of enthusiasm. Without knowing why, I found myself wishing to attend school, the school at Predapio, some 2 miles away. It was taught by Marani, a friend of my father. I walked to and fro and was not displeased that the boys of Predapio resented at first the coming of a stranger boy from another village. They flung stones at me and I returned their fire. I was all alone and against many. I was often beaten, but I enjoyed it with that universality of enjoyment with which boys the world around make friendship by battle and arrive at affection through missiles. Whatever was my courage, my body bore its imprints. I concealed the bruises from my mother to shelter her from the knowledge of the world in which I had begun to find expression and to which I supposed she was such a stranger. At the evening repast, I probably often feared to stretch out my hand for the bread, lest I expose a wound upon my young wrist. After a while, this all ended. War was over, and the pretense of enmity, a form of play, faded into nothing, and I had found fine schoolmates of my own age. The call of old life foundations is strong. I felt it when only a few years ago a terrific avalanche endangered the lives of the inhabitants of Predappio. I took steps to found a new Predappio, Predappio Nuovo. My nature felt a stirring from my old home, and I remembered that as a child I had sometimes looked at the plain where the river Rabbi is crossed by the old highway to Mendola and imagined there a flourishing town. Today that town, Predappio Nuovo, is in full process of development. On its masonry gate there is carved the symbol of fascism and words expressing my clear will. When I was graduated from the lower school, I was sent to a boarding school. This was at Fenza, the town noted for its pottery of the 15th century. The school was directed by the Salesiani priests. I was about to enter into a period of routine, of learning the ways of the disciplined human herd. I studied, slept well, and grew. I was awake at daylight and went to bed when the evening had settled down and the bats flew. This was a period of bursting beyond the bounds of my own little town. I had begun to travel. I had begun to add length after length to that tether which binds one to the hearth and the village. I saw the town of Forli, a considerable place which should have impressed me but failed to do so. But Ravenna. Some of my mother's relatives lived in the plain of Ravenna, and on one summer vacation we set out together to visit them. After all, it was not far away, but to my imagination it was a great journey, almost like a journey of Marco Polo, to go over hill and dale to the edge of the sea, the Adriatic. I went with my mother to Ravenna and carefully visited every corner of that city steeped in the essences of antiquity. From the wealth of Ravenna's artistic treasures, there rose before me the beauty and fascination of her history and her name through the long centuries. Deep feelings remain now, impressed then upon me. I experienced a profound and significant enlarging of my concepts of life, beauty, and the rise of civilizations. The tomb of Dante, inspiring in its quiet hour of noon, the Basilica of San Apollinare, the Candiano Canal, with the pointed sails of fishing boats at its mouth, and then the beauty of the Adriatic moved me, touched something within me. I went back with something new and undying. My mind and spirit were filled with expanding consciousness. And I took back also a present from my relatives. It was a wild duck, powerful in flight. My brother Arnaldo and I, on the little river at home, put forth patient efforts to tame the wild duck.
This concludes today's reading of my autobiography, by Benito Mussolini. Join us also the day after tomorrow for the subsequent part. Subscribe to Major Intonio's channel. Thank you for listening, and so long.